All right, so let's try this out. I'm going to post my little sermon here on writing. I say sermon because it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like a sermon. I have all these illustrations and stuff on the process of writing, but also I'll refresh your memory as to the structure of this thing that you're writing, of the specific aims page, which is the first part of your grant proposal assignment for this class. So let's start with that. So the structure of your aims, and again, there's a sample document, the aims that I wrote in my grad school dissertation proposal are on Blackboard, so you can look at that. But basically what it is it's one or two paragraphs that serve as sort of like a mini background of the aims. So you're going to say what is already known about your topic. Say you're studying depression. What we already know about depression. Well, depression is a really bad thing, and countless hours are lost to disability from depression, and there's these cognitive things that occur in depression. But one thing we don't know is this, and so that you're going to say what is known, and you're also going to say what is unknown. That's going to lead to the unknown thing that you will study. And what is unknown, I guess that should be facing the other direction there. Okay. And then you're going to say why the unknown thing that you're going to study is important. So, like I said, don't say, well, we're going to study this cognitive process in depression. It's already been studied, but no one's studied it specifically in left-handed people. Unless there's a good reason for that, no one's going to want to give you money to just study something in lefties or study it in redheads or some new population that there's no rationale for. It may make sense to do your study in a new population that hasn't been studied before, like say postpartum depression as opposed to another form of depression. That might be a great idea. But you've got to give the rationale for your idea, so why your new idea is important. So those are the first two paragraphs. You're going to say depression is bad. Here's the things we know about depression that are related to what I'm going to study, and here's what we don't know. Here's what I'm going to study. So those are the first two paragraphs. And then at the bottom, you're going to spell out exactly what you're going to do in your proposal. So specific aim 1 is I'm going to study a bunch of women who have postpartum depression and on this cognitive task or whatever. Specific aim 2 is I'm going to compare those data with brain imaging data or something. Okay, so that's what the aims are. Now I want to talk for a few minutes about writing and the process of writing. And this is, I think, really important, so I would definitely be sure to watch the rest of this video. You might be thinking, oh, he's just going to talk about his way that he writes or something, and it's not going to be useful to me. I don't think that's the case. I am basically going to do that, but I think this is going to be very valuable for you. These are things that no one ever taught me when I was in college, and I learned over like the 10 years after college. You have to write a lot in graduate school, and I wrote a lot when I was a research assistant after college, and there's a lot to learn, I found out. So these are from a few wise people taught me some things about writing that I'm going to pass on to you. So the first thing, let's see. I'll start with, so there's three basic things that I'll tell you. So the first thing is that writing is not the same as thinking. I think a lot of the time when you're working on a project, you might say to yourself, okay, I've thought about this, I know what I'm going to write, I have the ideas in my mind, I've thought about it a lot, so you feel like all you have to do is get the ideas from your mind onto paper. But that's not the case. I think once then usually what happens is you start to write and you're like, well, this doesn't sound too good, or I thought I had clear ideas about this, but now that I'm writing it, it sounds crappy, this sucks, and you want to go do something else. You don't want to write anymore. But that's because thinking is not the same as writing. Thinking generates these ideas, but to evaluate whether those ideas are good, you really have to write them or say them out loud to someone else. It's really, really hard to evaluate whether your ideas are good without doing one of those two things. It feels like they're good when they're in your mind, but and they might be good, but you need to make them a lot clearer, and that only happens through the fire of writing. Is how you refine that gold of your ideas. So writing is not the same as thinking. You use very different brain areas, I'm sure, when you're looking at a bunch of words across a page, which are these symbols of these ideas that are laid out. They're spread out on a page so you can kind of interact with a bunch of them over a very short period of time, as opposed to following this train of thought in your mind when you're just sitting there thinking about something, or thinking about something as you go for a walk. Which you should do. Maybe you should spend 10% of your project time, or maybe 5% of your time, going for a walk and thinking about stuff. But the rest of your time should be spent actually typing words on a computer page or reading articles. So that's the first thing. Writing is not the same as thinking. Right. So it's a different process, as I just said. But it's also like driving to Maine without headlights. So this first thing I said is basically a regurgitation of something Richard Feynman said. If you don't know who that is, he's a famous popular physicist who died, I believe, in the 90s. But he's a brilliant guy, one of the clearest thinkers I've ever encountered. You should go on a YouTube rabbit hole of Richard Feynman. It's a real treat. But he is the one who alerted me to this idea that writing is really a different process than thinking. The other idea here is also stolen from someone else who's a professional writer. Her name is Annie Lamott. She writes novels and stuff. But she also wrote a book called Bird by Bird, which is a book on writing. So this is stolen from her. And she says writing is like driving to Maine without headlights. And what that means is, how do you drive to Maine without headlights when it's dark out? Well, the challenge there is that it's dark. Your headlights only shine, 50 or 30 yards ahead of you at a time. So how is it that you're getting from point A in Massachusetts, say, Gordon College, all the way up to Maine, when you can only see 30 yards ahead of yourself at any given time? Well, the way it is you see those 30 yards and you go that distance, and then from there you can actually see 30 additional yards. So then you go that distance, and then from there you can see a little bit more. And you get there little by little, and every place you're at, you can only see a little bit further than you are at, but you take those couple of steps and then, oh, look at that, I have a new vantage point. And that's exactly how writing is. You may have ideas floating around in your head, you write a couple of them down, and you realize, oh, that idea actually kind of sucks, but there's this other thing that I now realize because I wrote this down, and then you write a little bit more, and that lends itself to something else. And you may end up discarding a lot of the things that you write, but the process of writing is allowing you to get these new vantage points and come to new ideas that you definitely would not have come to if you didn't go through the process of writing it down. So that's the first idea here, is that writing is not the same as thinking. The second idea, I guess I'll number these, is that writing is hard. Actually, I'll save that idea for last. I'll make the second idea, writing is rewriting, because that's related to what I was just saying. So the key to writing well, and this is also stolen from Annie Lamott, the professional writer there who wrote the book on writing, is that you need to write shit. You need to write terrible crap and be okay with that. And then only after you have written terrible things can you then go back and edit those things and make them beautiful. If you try to write beauty to begin with, like you're like, oh, I have these beautiful ideas in my mind, I'm going to write it down so that it's like perfect the first time I write it, that is really hard to pull off, and you can't do it fast enough. You might be able to write a sentence that's beautiful, but it's going to take a long time. And you're not going to be able to do it as well as if you just write terrible things and then edit those terrible things. You may disagree with me on that. You might say to yourself, hey, I've written beauty on the first try. go back and read that beauty and see how beautiful you think it is now that you've developed a little bit more as a writer. Probably since then, if this was something you wrote a while ago, you'll probably see that there's a lot to be improved in whatever you wrote before. So the key is really just to literally write stuff, and then edit that writing. That's how you write well, and how you write quickly. Because look at this, we got only a few weeks left in the semester. You got to write these aims. It's got to be good. The fastest way to do that is definitely going to be to write shit and then edit the shit. Okay. So that's what you should do. So you need to be able to write poor quality stuff, and then be okay with that. Leave it that way, and hope you don't die in the night, and someone else finds your writing the next day and says, "Wow, this person is a terrible writer. They were really awful." Hope that you wake up the next morning, have the opportunity to edit it, because when you do, that's when you're going to change it, and it's going to be a little bit better. And iteratively, each iteration of your editing is going to make it better and better. As you're doing that, you're also going to be reading other scientific papers. You're going to be doing response papers on these other assigned readings for class, and you're going to be getting new ideas and stuff, and you go back and reread some of the stuff you wrote before, and it's going to help you to edit it and make it better and better. So it should be an iterative process where you write awful things and then improve those awful things until they're beautiful things. Okay, so that's writing is rewriting. And finally, writing is hard. That was the last thing I was going to say. And you may agree or disagree with that. Why would I bring that up? Well, I'm going to try to help you with the fact that it's hard. So I think, for me at least, I hate writing. I mean, writing is the worst. It's so stressful. I get overwhelmed all the time. I try to write things down, and then I'm like, it makes me realize that I don't know what I'm talking about topic X. I thought I was writing about topic Y, but then I realized, crap, topic X is related. I have no idea what I'm talking with topic X. So then I just want to go leave, or go look on the New York Times, or play chess or something to distract myself from writing, because I realize that I'm screwed, basically. So that's the type of feel that's extremely unpleasant, going through that process, and so that makes writing really aversive, meaning it's an unpleasant stimulus. It's something we don't want to do, at least if you're like me. So how do you get around that? It's something we have to do sometimes, especially for this class. So here's what you should do. One is set your expectations low, that you're not going to solve the whole paper in one sitting. Set your expectations to write just a few sentences in a given sitting. Sit down, say for 15 minutes I'm going to sit here, maybe a half an hour I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to write part of my first paragraph over here on what is known about this. And I know I don't know everything, but I'm going to write down a couple things that I do know that we know. Or I'm going to write a sentence or two about why my idea is important. Okay, and that's it. And then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go reward myself with, a cupcake or go for a walk or something. So take it in small doses and set small goals is the first thing to do about the fact that writing is hard. The second thing to do is to trick yourself into writing. And what I'd recommend that you do there is, because it's so hard to start, you're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to write this sentence about why my study is important, but I know that idea is bull crap, and I really don't have any good ideas. So you don't want to start. You're scared to start. So what you do is, but you have to start. You have to force yourself to write these things and then edit those terrible things, and that's how it's going to be good. So you have to start. So how do you get yourself to start? I would recommend just opening up just open up a Word document or a Google Doc and play with editing for a little while. Write down your title, write down your name, the title page of the paper or whatever, and just play with the fonts and get it to look nice. And then once you've kind of done that for a little while, then it's easier. Oftentimes you're like, oh yeah, by the way, and I had this other idea. And you can just write it down. So playing with the font and stuff and formatting the document is a good way to sneak into the writing mode, to ease into it, kind of. So that trick, and then having small goals, are the ways to do a little bit of it every day. You should write for 15 minutes every day. If you do that between now and when this is due in 2 weeks, you'll probably have a really strong proposal, at least a lot stronger than if you spent that same amount of time all at once. You'll be infinitely better if you do that. If you do it 15 minutes a day as opposed to taking those 15 minutes over 14 days and putting them in one, 3 or 4 hour block. All right, so those are my tips. I hope you take those tips, try them out. Worst case, you try them out and you're like, this isn't for me. You can complain to me about it and make excuses about how your grant sucks because you followed my stupid advice. I'll give you mercy if you do that, and you honestly tell me that. But I recommend try it out and see what happens. I bet it's going to be surprisingly better than the usual writing process that you would have gone through.